Hello YouTube, and welcome back to the channel. Right, something a little bit different today. I had a question thrown at me by Roll Barbarosa, and he went, "Hello Stripey, can you explain to me about the Beatles rights? Universal is their publisher. Sony bought the rights of the Beatles songs from Michael Jackson. Is Apple Records still in possession of the Beatles? Paul Ringo worked on with Ron Howard on 8 Days a Week, the movie, and so on. Can you please do a video about this? Who has which rights now? Thanks a lot. Greetings from Oliver." Right, well, I don't know that much, Oliver, to be honest with you, mate. So what I did, I've done a little bit of Google searching, and I found a really interesting article on the website called Billboard. A brief history into the ownership of the Beatles catalogue. And it was published 2017 by Dan Rys. Obviously, if you can't stand my reading voice, I'll put a link in the description down below. Other than that, please enjoy. Paul McCartney filed a lawsuit in New York against Sony ATV in an effort to regain his ownership stake in the Beatles publishing catalogue in what could become one of the biggest legal struggles in recent music history. If successful, it would end a long and painful battle for McCartney over the ownership of his own songs, one that has involved everyone from early Beatles manager Brian Epstein to Michael Jackson, who bought the Beatles catalogue in 1985 as part of a $47.5 million deal for ATV, a situation that has long been painful for McCartney. Though the fight has been going on for decades, it can be confusing to track the ownership of one of the most valuable catalogues in music history, and particularly how one of its main contributors was cut out of his own creation. Below is a brief timeline of the long and winding ownership tale of the Beatles catalogue over the years. 1963. In March 1963, the Beatles' debut album, Please Please Me, was officially released, and Epstein sought a publisher for the songs written by McCartney, John Lennon, George Harrison and Ringo Starr. The company that resulted was called Northern Songs, majority owned by publisher Dick James, with Epstein, Lennon and McCartney, with the latter two songwriters owning 20% of the business apiece. 1965. Northern Songs become a public company, with Lennon and McCartney each owning 15% stake and Harrison and Starr splitting a small percentage. Harrison later wrote 1968's Only a Northern Song about his dissatisfaction with the diminished cut that he received in the deal. 1969. After relations between the Beatles and James deteriorated, James sold his stake in Northern Songs to ATV Music, owned by Lou Grade. And despite Lennon and McCartney's attempt to offer a counter bid, ATV gained control of the catalogue. Later that year, the duo sold their remaining shares to ATV, leaving them without a stake in the publishing of their own songs. They both controlled their respective songwriting shares. 1985. ATV Music, having been acquired by Robert Holmes à Court, was put up for sale. Michael Jackson, who had famously been told about the value of publishing by Paul McCartney during the sessions for their 1982 collaboration Say Say Say, purchased ATV's 4,000 song catalogue for $47.5 million, becoming the owner of approximately 250 Lennon-McCartney songs, as well as tracks by Bruce Springsteen, the Rolling Stones, Elvis Presley and more. McCartney, to say the least, was not pleased. 1995. Amid reported financial issue, Jackson sold half of ATV to Sony for approximately $100 million, and together the two formed Sony ATV Music Publishing, with Jackson and Sony each owning 50% of the company. 2006. With financial problems mounting and the potential bankruptcy appearing imminent, Sony negated a deal on Jackson's behalf to reduce the loan payments on his debts. As part of the negotiations, retained an option to purchase 50% of Jackson's 50% ownership in the future, which will give Sony 75% ownership of the catalogue. And according to the New York Times, the catalogue was valued at the time around $1 billion. And if Jackson had gone bankrupt, his shares of the company could have gone to auction in the proceedings that followed. 2009. Following Jackson's sudden death at the age of 50, his shares in the catalogue came under the control of his estate, run by the Jackson's attorney, John Branca, and industry veteran, John McClane. 2016. After announcing their intentions to trigger their purchase options of Jackson's stake in the company, Sony officially agreed to buy out the Jackson's estate full 50% of Sony ATVs for $750 million, making Sony the sole owner of the Lennon-McCartney catalogue, as well as Sony ATV's 750,000 songs. 2018. McCartney's lawsuit this week was filled with an eye on the US Copyright Act of 1976, which allowed songwriters to retain the publishing shares of their copyrighted works released before 1978, after a 56-year period comprised of two 28-year terms. For the earliest Beatles songs, that term will be up in 2018, with the later songs eligible by 2026. That reversion back to McCartney is not assured. However, Duran Duran lost a similar suit to Sony in December. One additional note about Lennon's side of the issue. A provision of the law states that if the songwriters were to die within the first 28-year period, the writer's heirs would be eligible to recapture that publishing share at the end of the first period, which in the Beatles' case would be 1990. Lennon died in 1980. The sources told Billboard that in 2009 that Sony cut a deal with his wife Yoko Ono prior to the expiration of that period to retain ownership of Lennon's share of the duration of the copyrighted period, which covers 70 years after the owner's death, in this case 2050. So yeah, that's all I know, or that's all I read really. I don't know this. Quite interesting read though. So Roll Barbarosa, I hope you're a little bit clearer on it. I thought I'd make a little video rather than just type it out. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm out now. I'll be back with another ramble real soon. Have a good week, people.